I feel like oftentimes when we talk about planning or investments or anything related to that, we hear a lot of things that sound like this is the way, and it's not always the case.
Welcome to the Retire with Peace podcast, the podcast where we help you create a fulfilling and stress-free retirement. Each week, we bring you expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you plan and live your best retirement life. Whether you're nearing retirement or already enjoying your golden years, this podcast is here to support you every step of the way. Let's embark on this journey together and discover how to retire with peace.
Welcome back to the Retire with Peace podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dave Zegel. If you're fans of the Mandalorian TV show, you'll often see the old school Mandalorians say, "This is the way." And they're talking about a creed or certain way of living that they carry out. I feel like oftentimes when we talk about planning or investments or anything related to that, we hear a lot of things that sound like this is the way, and it's not always the case. In fact, it's usually not the case that that is the only way to do something. There's lots of different ways to plan for retirement based on your situation. For example, we talk all the time about the mix of stocks and bonds and why to have at least 5 years of your money outside the stock market. That way you can have the next 5 years of income ready to go and individual bonds to mature. And I'm not going to go into all that because we cover that in almost all the other podcast episodes we have. So you can go back and listen to those if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But we have this mix of stocks and bonds because a lot of people have their retirement funds in an employer 401k or 403b that they've saved up over time, and they've gotten matching contributions from the employer, and that has grown with stock and bond markets over time. And that is the chunk of money that they are using to fund retirement. And in that case, most of the time, it makes sense to have this stock and bond structure that's almost certainly going to work. And so it makes it a very easy transition and an easy execution for retirement planning. Similarly, somebody could be selling their business if they're a business owner, and they will then have a big chunk of money from the business sale, or they might be receiving that money over time, depending on how it was financed and structured. But either way, they're going to have dollars available, and it probably makes sense to use this combination of stocks and bonds that we talk about all the time. However, there are plenty of situations where that is not the answer for someone. Now, I'll give a story here. We had somebody reach out to us a while back. We'll call him Sam. Nobody will know who this is. I'm not worried about that. So Sam reaches out to us and says, all right, I'm getting ready to retire. I have a pension. It was a nice pension, which is awesome. You don't see that too often anymore. I have a pension. I'm going to have Social Security in a few years when I start that. And I have some money set aside as well. I don't have any debt. And I have these rental properties. And the question was, well, what should I be doing from a planning perspective? He had heard from another advisor that he should sell the rental properties, move the money into stocks and bonds. He could get a better return. Never mind the fact that he's going to pay a lot of tax on selling the rental properties, which, by the way, I'm going to cover depreciation recapture in a separate video. But there's a lot of tax implications, especially when you sell rental properties that you've held for a long time. So the proper answer was not to try to plug him into some stock and bond combination fund. Could that have worked? Yes, absolutely. That could potentially get him a better outcome than what he's doing in his rental property. But the key is potentially. Because keep in mind, in this example, his rental properties had no problems being rented. He hadn't had vacancy issues in a long time. He'd had these rental properties for a long time. He understood the area he was in. He was getting solid cash flow on a regular basis, which is great for retirement. So we can take this situation, and where another advisor was saying, no, rental properties, sell at least some of that and put it in the market. And maybe that works. Absolutely could work. Is it guaranteed? Nope. Is it a good idea? Maybe. And that's the discussion I had with Sam. And ultimately I said, hey, what you got going is fine. You've got your pension. You're going to have Social Security. You have this regular income from rental properties. You don't have debt. If everything's going fine, leave it as fine. If we want to diversify away, he had some money set aside as well. He could use that for some stock investments if he wanted to diversify part of this. But overall, the answer was not to come in and say, well, you have to have a combination of stocks and bonds, and I don't know about real estate. All this stuff was all going really well for him. Leave it. Just keep executing on that. It's providing what he needed for retirement. He understands it. It's going fine. A huge change was not necessary, especially when considering the tax implications of selling a real estate property that you've had for a long time. But so often we'll hear so many people talk about, well, it has to be this way. So maybe they talk about it has to be stocks and bonds because real estate, you just never know. And, you might get bad renters and then everything gets messed up. And you can always provide a terrible scenario for anything. So you'll get stock people talking about how real estate's no good. And then you'll hear real estate focused people talk about how you're going to lose everything in stocks. And then you'll have other people say, you fools, you need to put everything in gold. And then other people talk about Bitcoin, and some other person talks about, you need to move to Portugal or Norway and invest in Saudi Arabia funds. And we hear all sorts of crazy stuff, and it comes off as, no, this is how you have to do it all the time. And that's not the case. That is absolutely not the case. For most people, and I shouldn't even say most people, I say a lot of people, as I mentioned before, they have their retirement in retirement accounts, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs. And so this combination of stocks and bonds absolutely makes sense, and it works. And the example that I just gave, that person didn't really have a whole lot sitting in retirement accounts. He had rental properties, which he had had for a long time and were doing well. Go with what you know. If something's working, let it keep working. You don't have to do something dramatically different. There's no one size fits all for every situation. We talk about the stocks and bonds combination because a lot of people are in that situation and that structure works. That doesn't mean that this is the only way. It doesn't mean if you're a real estate person that real estate is the only way. You can have either. You can have combinations of both, which is great. You can have, I mentioned like gold and Bitcoin, mix it all in. There's nothing wrong with any of those pieces. It's a matter of how are you structuring it that makes sense and that works. So don't get too stuck on this one thing or this one way of operating. Understand where you are now and what's going to work best going forward for you. In a lot of cases, if you're building up retirement accounts, the stock and bond mix that we talk about all the time, it works. It's not too crazy in terms of understanding it and executing on it, especially if you're working with an advisor that knows what that is and knows how to plan it out. It just allows you to really retire with peace, but that's not the only way to retire with peace, especially if you don't have a retirement balance built up. You might be in the real estate world for decades, and that's where you've built that up. I just wouldn't advise somebody who's 70 years old and retired to all of a sudden go out and try to build a real estate empire if you don't have to. There's a lot going on there. But if you, in this example, like Sam, have built this up over time, Sam should probably just stay in the rental properties he has already. Don't overcomplicate things. There's not one and only way. It's a matter of where are you at now and what is best for you moving forward.